We'll start the board of hearing on the work session for December 9th, 2021. So I'll try to say an opening prayer and we'll get started.
Right. Lord, we thank you for this day to go back and lead to the city's business. Lord, we just pray you be with us as we take care of the business in a timely and efficient manner. God, we just thank you for each one of us here for whatever reason that they're here for, to bring the audit before us or anything before us that we'll be discussing today. God, we just pray that you be with them, each individual. Pray God to be with their employees as they go out today and take care of the city's business, to keep us safe, do the jobs. Every department, Lord, we just pray that you continue to be with us, continue to bless us. Thank you for this food to prepare for this morning. In Jesus' name.
Amen. First item, we have a review of the 11/4/2021 work session minutes. Do you have any corrections, deletions, additions? I'll put those in the record. Next is a review of the 11/29/2021 special call work session minutes.
Okay, sorry about that. We didn't vote on anything at all. But under number 2, overview of estimated cost to fix the issues at Donation Park. And number 8, the statement reads, Richard Powell shared the poles need to be repaired and or replaced, and the electrical elevated. Alderman Wright requested this project be sent to bid to better understand the cost involved. The only project that was requested with the consensus of the rest of the board, it seemed like, was not the poles. We've got a study on the poles already with some numbers. The only one that was to be sent to engineering and bid was the electrical elevated part. By reading the answer, you could think that both of them were to be sent to bid. It was not. It was just one of them.
Something like that, correct?
I would just like to add a statement to that, since it's already written, with only the electrical elevated project being engineered and bid at this time. That will kind of separate them.
We'll make that. We'll bring it back to Tuesday night.
And another, I think it could have been clarified a little bit better. Number 3, we discussed the cost match for the Greenway project phase 2, which is primarily that bridge over the river. We discussed that in depth, and the statement here does say any further action on phase 2, the city must pay borrow design $76,500.
Charge of design, $76,500. We didn't take any action on that, but it was a consensus of the board. It was a recommendation, a consensus of the board. It seemed like that we would just hold off on doing anything on that project until possibly we see we could get more state funding. I think it would have been good to put that statement in here to have a matter of record.
Okay.
I would like that statement be added.
Okay. We'll add those 2 things. Anybody else?
Just on Danny's comment, so I thought we were just getting quotes on the Don Davidson electrical and poles. I didn't know that it was going to bid.
Well, it's a process. It's not actually going to bid until it goes through an engineering phase. But whether it be bid or whether it be quote, either way, doesn't matter to me how we phrase that. If you want to change it to quote, I don't have a problem with that at all. I just want to be sure that that really was the only one that was dealing with on getting some actual quotes or bids, either way. But if you want to change that bid to quote, that's fine with me. I don't have a problem with
I
it.
think it should be changed to quote because bid is we actually put it out to bid. So to me, that would be kind of, we've already approved it to go to bid. Right now, we haven't approved it because we don't know what the quote is.
Yeah, that was the purpose of getting the engineering estimates, actually estimates. And maybe estimates would even be a better terminology than quotes. Maybe estimates would be better because that's what we're trying to get, an engineering estimate.
So we agree on estimates? Say estimates.
It'd be probably better, yeah. I think it would be.
All right, we'll make those adjustments and bring that back on the agenda to approve on Tuesday. Next, we have Mr. Dan Hancock from Putnam and Hancock CPAs to go over our FY 2021 audit.
Thank you, Mayor. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You've got in front of you the financial statements of the City of Fayetteville for the year ended, as you indicated, June 30, 21. I'm going to give you an overview of this at a very high level. First of all, I will pause. There's about 130-something pages. If y'all want to take just a minute, the mayor said I had 10, so I'll give you a minute. Read through those statements if you've got any questions as we go through this process right here. But just an overview again, the statements consist of the City of Fayetteville, which include the governmental activities of the city and the business activities of the City of Fayetteville. The government activities include the government funds, the general funds and so forth, the school funds, and then the city's non-major funds, as well as the business activities, which are FPU and the sanitation fund. With that, there's an index, and I'm going to give you a kind of a report layout. There's an index there on pages 1 and 2, which is the roadmap through the financial statements. Pages 3 and 4 is the audit opinion, which is our responsibility to express an opinion on the financial statements, their fairness under generally accepted auditing or generally accepted accounting principles. And this year, that statement is an unmodified, clean opinion, if you will, that is issued consistent with the past. Pages 5 through 11 are management's discussion and analysis, which is an excellent overview of a summary of the city's government activities, business activities, and we'll get into that just a little more detail in a few minutes. Following that on pages 11 and 12 are the government-wide financial statements. And then on pages 14 through 16 are the proprietary fund financial statements, or the business activities, if you will. And then on 17 through 19 compares the government budget, both the original budget and the final budget, to the actual numbers, both for revenues as well as expenses by the various departments or accountants. And you might ask, what's the difference between the government fund financial statements and the government-wide? We've had that discussion in the past, but for the new ones here, the government-wide, that is the thrust behind that is to the business activities of like the utilities and the sanitation fund are on a full accrual basis of accounting type thing, meaning that as services are rendered, the revenue is recognized. As expenses are incurred, they are recognized as an expense. On the government and the fund statements, they are on what they call a modified accrual basis based on when the revenues are available for use, which is somewhat a cash basis, and then it recognizes those revenues that's 30 days after year end. So it's kind of converting the modified accrual to an accrual basis for the government funds to be comparable to the business activities like the utilities. So that's what's in the government-wide statements. Does that make any sense right there to kind of put us on a business type approach? Following that on pages 25 through 86, light reading is all the footnotes to the financial statements. That's 62 pages trying to explain the numbers that are up in the front. Following that, they have what they call required supplementary information. That is primarily for two areas for the city, for its post-employment benefit statements, liabilities for both at the government level, at the school level, and at the utilities level, followed by the pension liabilities, again, for the government for the schools and for the utilities. And the big thing about that is years past, going back several years, these liabilities were not on the books. It's kind of like you heard about General Motors and their defined benefit plans and how costly they were. Those liabilities were not recognized. So the accounting profession came out and said, hey, these are real liabilities. We need to book these things. So the process came about that first you would disclose that in the footnotes, and then eventually they required you to book that liability on the financials. So it's a big number. It's a very, very big number. Following that, there's some other financial schedules on pages 112 through 132. Those are interesting from the standpoint it gives you the detail of like the debt of both the city and the business activities for the utilities and so forth. And it breaks that debt down by what is due as far as principal and interest through the issue from the issue date or as of June 30, 22 for the next year, all the way through maturity for each one. Pages 133 and 134 are reports on internal control and the city's compliance with laws, rules, regulations, and contracts and grants and so forth. And that as well is unmodified. There are no findings there in terms of the definition of a finding would be, do we have a significant deficiency in internal controls or compliance with contracts and grants? There were none, no significant deficiencies, or a material weakness in internal controls. So that's a good thing. I will discuss at the very end some recommendations that we'll have to management, to the board, if you will. Really, it's focused to management, but we'll bring it to the board's attention. But they're just recommendations for improvements. Okay, included in there, you had a loose letter. It's called, it's a letter for communication to those that are charged with governance of the city, where we just make certain items, you aware of certain items that in connection with the audit. So to highlight a few of those items, it indicates that the responsibility of the financial statements are the board's and management. Our responsibility is to express an opinion on the fairness of those financial statements in accordance with GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. It talks about accounting estimates that are included in the financial statement. Those estimates include depreciation, meaning how long is something going to last. That's really applicable at the full accrual side on the government-wide. The pension liabilities and the OPEB liabilities, because both of those require actuarial estimates that are involved in there. And further, finally, the allowance for doubtful accounts. Not so much at the government side, because property taxes, we're pretty well going to collect our property taxes here. So there's a very nominal allowance on the books for that. But over in the business type activities for collection on accounts and so forth, their allowance is a little bit higher. So there's more of an estimate required there. Accounting practices, one thing that is different in the report this year, the organization that governs these financial statements is called the GASB, Governmental Accounting Standards Board. One of their issues that's applicable for this year is about bringing on fiduciary activities, and it was determined that the internal service funds of the schools, which include like the athletics fund, Beta Club Fund, National Honor Society, Teacher Fund, and some of those types of funds need to be included in the primary government, the City of Fayetteville financial statements. So we had to bring those onto the books, and since we've got some comparative numbers here in the MD&A section, you have to show a restatement of that. It had no impact on the operations of the City of Fayetteville. It was really kind of a balance sheet type number that got brought on. The schools, internal school funds, have their own audit report on these funds. We're just required to bring them in as well, under the big umbrella of the primary government. few other things, representations. We have a letter that we ask certain officials of the government to represent to us about the accuracy of information in the financial statements and contracts and things of that sort. Just kind of a good CYA practice that we have to have. Disagreements with management in connection with the audit, we had none. The board needs to know that. Consultation where management may have consulted with other accounting firms regarding the accountant's report, auditor's report, I should say, or selection of different accounting principles and so forth. To our knowledge, there were no outside consultations by management. There was no disagreements over any how we were going to opine on the financial statements or any discrepancies in accounting principles. Difficulties in connection with the audit, none. We always wait, for certain information to come from the state regarding the pension and the OPEB, so we're right up to the wall on that, but there were no difficulties associated with that. Other issues, none. We have routine discussions with management about various internal operating matters. Their questions to us or questions that we might have of them, but no items of note right there. So that's that letter that you have, each of you, and we're just required to give that to everyone. Okay. Back to some of the details in the financial statement. Again, I mentioned it's an unmodified report. Pages 5 through 11 on the management's discussion and analysis. If you read nothing else in that report, which is a real challenge, pages 5 through 11 give you a very good overview of what is the details that follow. And to somewhat highlight that, on page 7 of that MD&A gives you a very condensed view of the balance sheet of the business activities and the government activities, and it compares 2021 to 2020. And you can sort of look at it and see changes, if you will, between the numbers on the balance sheet side. It's called a statement of position. It's really just a balance sheet. Likewise, down there below that table, statement of activities is statement of activities. It's another word for income statement, and you can see the revenues and the expenses, and you can see what the bottom lines are for current year and prior year. On page 8 is a detail of the government's expenditures by function. And below that, another table, government revenues by source. On page 9 is the business activities, and there's just some statistic metrics there for really, it summarizes return on assets, and it breaks it down in the utility departments between gas, electric, water, telecom, and then finally the sanitation department, which is under the government, city government. Also on that page 9 gives you a summary of the capital assets, both between the government activities and the business activities. And it's really very high level between land and buildings and things of that sort. Page 10 is an overview of the debt, both for the government and the business activities. And this year, we had some debt issues. We refunded some debt, as you're aware of, and we took on some new debt this year. Now, just to not get into the real particulars, because I know you have not had a chance to go through these statements, but I do this every year for you. Everybody seems to like this, and it's a debt service coverage comparison, where we are both at the government funds, the school funds, and the business activity funds. And so the combined debt service coverage this year is 3.38. They call it EBITDA, earnings before debt, interest, depreciation, and taxes, divided by the debt that's out there. So that is a very, very strong. In a lot of debt covenants, you'll see And Jeff, I think, will attest to this. You'll see it 1.25, 1.15. So here we are very strong at a 3.38. That compares to last year, the number was 3.18. So you can see we've had improvement. Compares to 2019 where we were at 3.02. So there's a continuing improvement in the debt service coverage. This year, at the government side of things, we can restate that. They call it a pro forma type of adjustment. The city kind of unexpectedly incurred, the state did an updated landfill study. And we got the numbers in somewhat after year end, but the long and the short of it, the city is in a joint venture with the county over the landfill. And it was a substantial increase in the liability out there. The city's portion of that liability was $437,000 that had to be booked into these government wides as an expense. So that's a big number. The city also had a number of paving projects that went on in 2021, which paving is just considered a repair. It's not a capital item because we're just maintaining our infrastructure. That was another $430,000. So if you were to add those two numbers simply back to the city's cash flow numbers, that EBITDA or that cash flow number of 3.38 would be increased up to 3.57. So again, very, very strong. Just to kind of give you something that you can carry around in your mind, some easy numbers. Another thing, there's always a lot of stuff going on here at the city. I'm not sure what was discussed in the details, but we have in construction in progress at June 30 about $1.9 million in projects that are underway. We have several that were completed during the year, but $1.9 million at June 30. Awesome. Everything below cash probably is hard to comprehend, but cash for the government increased about $1.9 million. That's primarily a net change from bonds that were issued, unexpended money type thing. Capital asset, we did have increases. This is improvements both at the government and the business activities, about $5.375 million reinvested back into the city of Fayetteville, business and government activities. The pensions and OPEB number are always a mystery because that's calculated at the state level by actuaries and so forth. But this past year, the market's been good, so the liabilities are down, and the asset premium for both of those is very positive. There's just enough said on that right there because it's a lot of detail minutia to go further. Things to look for in the future from the accounting and reporting side of things. Leases is going to be a big thing within our industry. Revenue recognition is a big thing. Leases will not have a significant impact here at the government, at the city. From talking with Stacy, most of the leases that we have are for copiers. Not expecting that to even be material, so we may not even worry about that right there. But the gist of it is, again, trying to get all these unrecognized liabilities onto the financial statements like OPEB and pension leases. A lot of businesses structure their balance sheet to have an operating lease so that they keep that obligation off of the financial statements. Now with this new guidance that's out there, it's called right of use. So if you have a lease, you have a right of use, and you have to capitalize that asset, and you also have to capitalize the related liability and book it. Can have an impact on debt service covenants and so forth. Here, it's not going to be a big issue. I just put it out there for your information. Finally, I would like to mention just a little plus on our hat right here, the quality control that we do have to go through as a firm that issues financial statements. We do have quality and control documents. The comptroller, state of Tennessee, does take a look at these financial statements, and in fact, they do come and review our papers from time to time to see that we're in compliance with all the reporting guidelines and auditing documentation. Our firm just completed our triennial review this week and received a pass, which is the best that you can get, comment. So we're very happy with that. Takes a lot to get it, but if you stay in this business, that's what you have to do. So just to let you know that we did pass, and as the reviewer said, he said, well, it's a blessing and a curse. He said, you pass, that's the blessing. The curse is you got to do this for 3 more years. So just kind of giving you an idea. With that, I would like to thank management and the staff for helping us get the audit done, get it done timely. And I'll open it up for questions, and I will mention that the financials are due to the comptroller's office by 12/31, if we can. That's subject to the board's approval.
Any questions of Mr. Hancock?
Yeah, okay.
Items from an aquatics, but we didn't get the purchase order in place. We had the quotes, but we didn't get the purchase order in place. So that is a comment that we're making in this recommendations to management to make sure we follow those purchasing policies.
Okay, on page 7 at the bottom, I noticed
A couple other things, though, just to follow up with that.
Oh, okay.
We mentioned last year about fixed assets. The system, the city is in process of implementing a new and updated fixed assets software application from local government. We encourage that. The one that's out there is, I'm not sure how it works. It works today and maybe it doesn't work tomorrow. You put an asset in there today and you say, I put it on the books in June, and or I put it on the books in November, and I want to report for all my activities through June. It's going to pick up that November asset in the current period. So and you hit the report tomorrow and it doesn't show up. So there's a lot of inconsistency. Hopefully the new not eGov, but local government software application for fixed assets will be an improvement. And we've recommended centralizing, capturing all those costs, so it's a little bit easier to update for all these different departments. It seemed like there was one other item. The other thing was just about the leases. So that was it. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, at the bottom of page 7, you mentioned this, but it's kind of a general, I guess, numbers. The city's total revenue increased 4.24% for the fiscal year. Mm-hmm. And while the total expenses increased 3.11%, which that sounds like that's a really positive number.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Going in the right direction.
It's going in the right direction. Okay. That's just requirements to disclose those general numbers right there.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just kind of a reference point.
It kind of shows that we are
controlling our cost.
Yeah.
Yes.
Controlling our costs.
Exactly. Right. And in fact, good point. Just if you look right above that sentence on that page 7, and you look to the far left there in column 21, the 2021 column, and you say, well, hey, Dan, what happened here? The change in net position shows a loss, $346,000.
Yeah, I saw that.
A negative. It doesn't show a loss. It's a negative.
Right.
Okay. That's where you come back, and because again, we had $437,000 accrual for landfill. Unexpected. Right. That's in that number. Add it back, we go positive. Right. Add back $430,000 worth of streets, and we go positive. Right. So that would put you back to, if you see in the 20 column, we had the year before $281,000. We're right back where we were the year before. Okay. Just simply those two numbers.
And you and Alderman and Jeff has made real positive comments about these 3.38 debt service numbers and 3.57 CD, how good those numbers are. I don't have a real good understanding of what that means.
Okay, I'd be happy to show that to you or talk with you a little bit more on that, just to give you
I
an
know it's
idea.
good, but I don't know.
Why is it good?
Where Dan touched 1.25, if somebody comes to get a loan, say, a 1.25 is a passive number for someone to get qualified for something.
No.
So we're way, from that number 125 to what we're at is a huge difference. So we're in really, really good shape.
Even after the bond issue, we're still in good shape.
Yes, and so to put it on something that's easier for me to understand as well, I mean, what Jeff and I are talking about is in the business world there, but to put it down to an individual or personal level, when you go and finance a home and get a mortgage, generally if your liabilities exceed 40% of your income, you're not going to get, it's going to be difficult to get a loan. In other words, your obligations that you've got to meet compared to your income, if they're more than 40%, Jeff's probably not going to be able to make you a loan type thing. So here in this, if we go out to the market and the bond market, and they take a look at our income. Now, when you take this calculation, what it will do is it'll take your income, it adds back depreciation, because that's a soft cost, if you will, and it adds back interest, and then it'll add back amortization, which is generally a small number, and then taxes. We don't have taxes per se, but you add those numbers back, and that becomes our EBITDA, earnings before interest and taxes and depreciation and so forth. And then you compare that to your debt. And it's how many times can I want to make sure that I can pay that debt obligation, okay, that's becoming due. It's just, and it's not the total debt, it's just the principal and interest requirements that you have to make for the next year. Okay. And so if that exceeds generally 1.15, you're okay in terms of meeting your debt service compliance. In our case, and in our case, most of our debt at the city is general obligation. So, meaning that if we did have a problem meeting our debt service, we have the ability to raise property taxes and to comply with that debt service. Over on the utility side, where they have a lot of revenue bonds, they can increase rates, as we know. But it's a little harder for them to do that compared to us and the property tax side of things, where we can increase rates. Does that help any?
Yeah, that helps some.
Okay.
And an easy way to think about it, if you're at a 1, that means you've got exactly what you need to pay for everything that you owe.
Okay.
But
So
you can't miss anything.
Right.
I mean, that's right.
You don't have any wiggle room.
There's no wiggle room right there. Something
got a
has
lot
to
of wiggle
give.
room.
You got a lot of wiggle room.
On another, too, and I'm not having time to go through this, but I will.
Okay.
It's the first time I've seen it, really. So the city school systems audit is in this also, and also the federal public utilities audit's in this.
Right.
In general, are both of those really on good firm standing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And just to put that number in your pocket too, on a debt service coverage, the schools, their debt service coverage for 2019, oh boy, I'm going to step off on this right here. They had some expenditures back in 20. So their debt service coverage there was 0.19. It is back to 0.98 this year on the schools. And again, that's due to a lot of improvements that they're making at the school, okay? Whereas here at the city, we were at 3.16 in 20, and if you adjust for those two items that I'm talking about, we would go from 3.16 in 2020 to a 2.86. Okay, the utilities were at 3.48 in 20, and they are 3.91 this year.
Okay.
So those numbers that I was giving you earlier are the combined.
Their averages.
But we are showing very strong debt service coverage and composite improvement. So, bond, and that's why we got such a good rate on the bond
Well,
issue.
we need to be interested in the school and FPU, because They can't get bonded on their own, we've got to do it. The bonds come through
The
us.
city stands behind them,
So
exactly.
we need to know the position of their,
Their financials,
Yeah, right.
they are in here. Yeah, they're part of the city.
and you feel like both of them's pretty good right now?
Yes, sir.
Very good.
Yes, sir.
One in particular. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Hancock? Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll go into our department reports. Let's start with Public Works, Mr. Eddie Plunkett.
Thank you, Mayor. The paving got completed last week. We got the parking lot at Cahoots striped. The one at Stonebridge Park will probably be striped in the spring. As you can see in the notes, the sanitation pickup will not change through Christmas or New Year's this year. It'll run just as normal. We have an employee down at the shop that's in bad health. We've got a money jar down there. We've got a box for canned goods for Christmas for him. If anybody'd like to donate, we would appreciate it. And that's my report, Mayor.
You also had an item, well, first, before we go to the item, the parking lot over by Cahoots looks really good.
Thank
I
you.
mean, for those that go over that area right behind the square over there, that parking lots were in really bad shape, but it looks really good.
Mr. Gross and them done an excellent job on grading it too. Last week when it was raining, we was over there and water gets away from all the buildings and down through the middle of the parking lot, so.
Plus the one over behind Kraft Building too, that looks really good
Yes,
too.
sir.
What about the Adams Street? Did it get paved?
Yes, sir.
It is paved. I'm not been out
It was
that way,
about
so.
3 or 4 weeks ago it was paved. Yes, sir.
Okay. Might also add, if you've not been down to the parking lot of Stonebridge Park, there's a lot of lighting been put in.
Correct.
We put a lot of lighting in down there where it's safer.
Correct, that's right.
We're, also Mr. Gross and myself talked, we need to do something to keep people off that lot, or not people, but tractor trailers off that lot.
I've had a complaint, I've not brought that up, but I've had a complaint with tractor trailers parking on a lot of places. I've even had a complaint of tractor trailers parking down in the paved parking area at Camp Blunt. Somebody's seen a tractor trailer down there. So I'm not myself,
I
but
haven't either.
that is an issue, but they don't have many places to park though. Really?
There's a few service stations around town that allow them to park. The old CFW, they allow them to park out there.
Can we just put up some signage just to kind of remind the truck drivers to not park on those lots?
It don't do them good.
They don't good.
We've put no parking signs out behind Frito-Lay and they go around and park behind them.
Okay.
So, I mean, we can put them up, but they don't pay no attention to them.
So you had an item came through finance the other day, Norgon Systems Diagnostic Tool Purchase.
Yes, sir. This is scan tools for any of our vehicles over a ton. This will get them all, I think, but the cat motors. It'll save us a lot of money in the long run. We're paying anywhere from $400 to $750 for a diagnostic test on the vehicle. And then we have to wind up sending it somewhere. We could do that, we could do the diagnostic here at home and not having to be paying somebody to come in and do them for us.
So the purchase price is $6,616 from your quote, and then after that, there'd be almost a $2,000 a year in maintenance, but that could be put in future budgets.
Correct.
The board, okay with taking this to Tuesday night? You had mentioned the county just purchased this too on their side.
Correct, they did. We've had to send a truck out to them already to be tested, scanned by it. And that, that saved us, anywhere from $400 to $750.
Any other questions, Mr. Plunkett? Thank you, sir. We'll go to police. Mr. Casillas.
Good morning.
Morning.
We have two for the oath of office. It's going to be Drew Ivy and Freddie Arnold. And we needed a vet permit for the Dr. Martin Luther King. And that's all I have for today.
The Martin Luther King, is it the same?
That's going to be the same route, same time,
Okay. It's a little different this year. Previous years, it would come up, and then they would have a ceremony, and then they would go down College Street or Washington. And so, but now I think they just go back. Is that correct?
Yes.
So
It'll be
they don't have
coming up,
that.
from what I understand, when I spoke to the gentleman, it'll be coming up Market, going up to the square, do their presentation, then going back down on College.
Okay, gotcha, okay. Everybody good carrying this forward? Yes. All right. Any other things? Any other questions of Mr. Casillas while he's here? All right, thank you, sir. We'll go Fire Department with Chief Kimber.
Thank you, Mayor. I have an oath of office for Logan Weaver. He's actually been employed for just a couple of months, but he had some family emergencies and just couldn't make the meetings previously, so we're going to get that oath of office done for him. Engine 2's rolling along real good. They're still, so they're going along good with it. Engine 4 is in service now. I know some of y'all may have already seen it out on the streets. I'm requesting to purchase a new hose dryer. My current hose dryer is 20 plus years old, and I'm having some electrical motor problems. The current motor that's in it now is obsolete. They don't even make that motor no more, and I've had an electrician there to try to find a replacement motor, and he's not having no luck with it either. So I think y'all all have some quotes on your iPads for that, and then that will be plus installation. The electrician told me that it's kind of hard to give him an exact quote without seeing the equipment, what he's going to be putting in.
So the 2 is the one for 10-645 suitable?
There's one for 10-645, and then there's one for 11-35.
Which one are you recommending?
I'm recommending the 10-645. Both of them are the exact same machines. It's just two different companies, two different vendors.
Okay.
You have these funds available?
Ma'am?
These funds are already in your budget?
No, ma'am. I don't have that much in extra in my budget for that. No, ma'am.
Okay.
Is the maintenance and upkeep of the yearly, is it the same on both of them?
Yes, and it'd be the same warranty. They offer like a 10-year warranty on some parts and stuff, and then it goes down to different items in the machine. It'll go down to like I think there's one part that has like a 5-year.
Board comfortable taking this forward, Chief? All right. Anything else?
That's it.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Parks and Rec, Mr. Brian Carter.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have one item on our agenda, and this is for my oath of office. And I would also like to thank all departments with their help with the parade. It was a success, and looking forward to working with each and every one of you next year.
How many entrances do we have for the?
116 pieces overall, about 70 entries.
Okay. It was very successful. We got lucky with the weather.
We did. We did.
The previous night with the bright lights and festive nights was a success too. And I was even down Saturday after the parade, and there was people in the park after that. So I think that both turned out very well.
They did. They really did.
Any other questions, Mr. Carter? All right.
Thank you.
We go Planning Codes, Ms. Christy Gentry.
Thank you, Mayor. Both of my first 2 items, just wanted to give a reminder that there will be a public hearing that was advertised in the paper, and it's been on our website. The first item is for ordinance number 2021-15, amendment to allow self-service storage units in the I-1 district as a special exception. This began because we were approached by a property owner who owns property that is zoned I-1, and he wanted to do self-service storage units in that building. I worked with Mr. Hill to draft an ordinance, but this will apply to the whole I-1 district if it is approved. So anytime we are approached in the future, if this goes through, then we would, it would be approved use as a special exception and would go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Even if this is approved, the property owner that has approached us will have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for his approval.
And that specific property is down on 6, where the old first-class printing building is.
Yes, sir. And Mr. Landers is going to attend the board meeting if anybody had any specific questions. One good thing about doing it this way is that if we get any future requests too, we do not have to do a rezoning. It can keep it zoning, which in this case, this is in the middle of a neighborhood. If we rezoned to commercial, it could create a nuisance for the future of that property if, the storage units went out.
Plus, you also had a request from Elaine Middleton at IDB. That was part of this special exception, was because of, just in case in the future, they wanted to keep that spot industrial.
Correct, yes, sir.
Any other questions about that item? And you had the next one, you have another public hearing for ordinance 2021-16, rezone of 516 Adams Street from C3 to R3.
Yes, sir. This item, we also, since this is a rezoning, we did send out the adjacent property owners letters. We have not had any calls, questions, or concerns regarding this. Downgrading in zoning is actually a good thing. This is kind of a spot zone in that neighborhood. Everything surrounding it is already R3, and this will allow the property owner to be able to do a residential use. Currently, with it being C3, he's not allowed to do so. And he also will be attending the meeting.
And the next item you had was, we talked about this in finance, billboard contract renewal with the chamber. Basically, with the contract starting in February would be $10 more a month for the next 12-month period.
Yes, sir, that is correct. The total price for the city's portion for the entire one-year contract would be $3,558. This item is currently budgeted and does come out of the tourism fund. They were just trying to go ahead and see if, to get this board locked in case we were not going to renew, then they could already be shopping for a future tenant for that space.
Well, I expressed that for years we didn't have any billboard presence. This is at mile marker 12, which is just in before exit 14 that comes to Fayetteville. It's a really good placement. I recommend that we keep it. We have two. We have one coming out of Alabama, but like anything that advertises and promotes Fayetteville is a good thing. So do we even need to vote on this item if you already got it budgeted? Because we can adjust for the budget for next year for the extra money per month.
Yes, sir. We could do that. Ms. Denton just reached out to me to make sure that the board would be in agreement to go into another one-year contract.
Is the board okay with that? Okay. Anything else?
I do want to, I'll give a full update next week, but I wanted to go ahead and update the board on a Board of Zoning Appeals meeting that we had November the 30th. We had 2 items on that agenda. The first item was for a special exception for the old Stonebridge Academy. Miss Tiffany Calvert approached us about she wanted to purchase that property to move her Cheer Magic All-Stars competition cheer business to that building. If granted the special exception, she would move forward with purchasing the entire property. As a special exception, it was allowed under recreational gymnasium. There was a special exception in that zone for that, and the Board of Zoning Appeals did give her that special exception. That did not change the zoning. It is still R2, but this will allow her to occupy that building under that use. The second item was for down here at 800 Huntsville Highway, the old Baden Hot Building lot. We were inquired about the log trucks parking there. That also is allowed as a special exception. So we worked with Mr. Hill and the manager of that property, took that to the Board of Zoning Appeals. They did not do any action on that item. The chairman of the BZA wanted to see if the owner would be open to maybe putting up a barrier to kind of block that. So the manager is going to go back and talk to the property owner, and that item is continued until January the 13th at 10. We will hold another meeting, and then they will decide to vote for approval of that special exception.
Okay. Any questions, Ms. Gentry?
Thank you.
We'll go to IT.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Just a few updates. with our fire alarm, ADT they're still waiting on a couple parts to come in before they actually schedule an install date for us. In the meantime, they went ahead and submitted the building plans for the job, which have been approved by our building inspector. They also plan to visit and do a final walkthrough with their lead technician before the installation begins, but again, that's probably going to be closer to the time that parts are actually received for the job. And that's where we are with the fire alarm for the moment. Spectrum cable. Everything was rolling right along for a December 17th completion date. Unfortunately, last Friday, I received an email. They said they did a capacity check of the nodes that actually feed video to the buildings in this area. They're at max capacity. So they said they're either going to do a split or an augmentation of that node in order to give capacity for the additional cable feeds that will be coming in. Fortunately, this is going to set us back 30 to 60 days from the original December 17th deadline. So, worst case scenario, we may be mid-February before the cables are back up.
So we're talking about this TV cable?
Yes, sir.
Spectrum, is that?
Spectrum Charter, yes.
So they've maxed out the capabilities already?
According to them, that's what they told me. They said they did a capacity check, and it came back last Friday.
So I'm glad I changed 3 months ago.
Now, does that have any negative effect on any of our departments?
No.
Okay.
It should not. New item. We have most of our employees here are using outdated office software for their computers. We've got some still on 2013, even some on 2010. And so I had some funds approved to buy new office software. And so I'd like to use that money and go towards a subscription model that Microsoft does and get 25 licenses of business apps. This would be a reoccurring cost of $9.99 per user per month. So that would be $249.75 a month for $2,997 a year, reoccurring. I was quoted by Rapid Scale, who does these licenses for us for a 36-month term. This will be enough licenses to cover the remaining computers that are outdated since when I added new computers to the police department, that kind of took care of our office software there. So this is just taking care of the rest that weren't new computers. And additional benefits of this will be that we're going to get access to OneDrive, which will give our employees cloud storage of files in case they would need to access this when they weren't in the building for some reason, or be working from home or some kind of emergency. They just need to look up some information. They'd have that access if they chose to. Also, this will give the employees that I give this license to the ability to install office software on 4 additional machines of their choosing. So if they've got a laptop or a desktop at home, they could install office software on that machine. They'd have access to files that they put in their OneDrive, and they'd be able to work on something. Kind of cuts out having to actually supply them a laptop at the moment, because the wait time to get laptops is 2 to 4 months out. And basically my end goal is to give our employees more capability of working from home if they need it.
Okay. So this came out of finance. I think we're still a little trying to figure out how much is within your budget and how much is additional.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
How much is how much out of this 12.5 or the this 29.97, is this within your budget, or?
Yes, I was approved $12,500 last year for new office upgrades. Mm-hmm. Back then, we were thinking, this was when Office 2019 was still out. The 2021 hadn't come out yet. They were priced at $250 per machine, and so That's what the funds were originally purchased for. But when I did the police department and got new computers over there was a deal where I was able to bundle Office software with them, and that cut out almost half of the licenses that I needed. And so I'm taking it and wanting to do the subscription model with the remaining machines that I needed upgrading.
Okay. Everybody good with that? Okay. All right. Anything else on IT?
No, sir.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We go to finance, Mr. Rozelle.
Good morning. The first item we have on the agenda is for the Fayetteville City School System. This is the first invoice for them for Terracon, which is part of this dome project they're working on as part of that grant. All of their invoices do have to come through our board to be approved.
Am I good with this?
I'm good with it.
Okay. And the second one is invoice number 3 for the architecture group that's working on this project.
Yeah, we've already approved 2 of these. Everybody good with going forward with that?
All right. And the third item is a budget amendment for the Fayetteville City School System, and it's some of their cleanup work, moving budget amounts from one expense account to another.
This is common. Don't carry that forward.
And the only other thing I'd like to mention today is I do have 2 of our municipal staff employees I want to recognize, and that is Ms. Pam Gentry and Ms. Michelle Mitchell. They both completed their State of Tennessee Certified Municipal Finance Officer certification in November. And y'all, this certification is no joke. This is not one of these you show up and you get credit type things. From what we have figured, these are approximately 20 hours of self-study that you have to go through, going through these study guides before your class ever starts. It's 10 classes total, 6 to 7 hours per class, and then a test at the end that you're required to pass for each of these classes. So this is no small feat on their part.
Well, congratulations, ladies, on that. That's great.
Yes.
And then also you had sales tax.
Yes, our sales tax for November came in just over $269,000, which is 12% more than November last year.
Great. And the last thing is, Mr. Hancock mentioned about the asset software, but you notified finance that you and
Yes,
Monica are training on that now.
we've got the upgraded software installed on our computers. We have discovered, I worked with local government back and forth for several months trying to convert the data out of the old system into the new system. And finally, after working with their computer programmers and all, we just came to the resolve that it would be a whole lot less work to just start and hand enter all the data new than to try to go back and alter the old data to get fields to where this field would convert straight to this field. And so the upgraded software is installed on our computers. We did a short, brief training with them last week on it, and we have started entering all that new data. Once we get all the data entered, they'll give us another call and we'll do a quick training on, how to process the depreciation, how to process the year-end reports. And I think it's going to be a whole lot better than the last. The last version we had is it's actually 2 versions behind what they're on now. So it's old, antiquated, and still operates with function keys and cap locks and codes. And so that is one. It's been on the auditor's recommendation the last couple years, but we have finally got to the point that we're getting that taken care of now.
Any other questions, Mr. Rozelle? Thank you. We go to administration, Mr. Howell.
Yes, sir. As Director Carter mentioned earlier, the Christmas parade went very well. I'm very proud of the way the departments come out and work together. Each and every one of them pulled their weight and even more. The City Municipal Building will be closed December 24th and 27th. For Christmas, and we'll be closed on December 31st for New Year's. We wish everybody a Merry Christmas. That's my report, Mayor.
Any questions, Mr. Howell? All right, we'll go into other. I notified the board several weeks ago. We have a appointment of Board of Zoning Appeals. Mr. Pat Haynes has been serving. I asked him if he'd like to serve again. He would. I'd like to bring that forward Tuesday night for a vote. Good. And then We don't have them yet. We're supposed to get them today. Alderman Bryant reached out to me about Mark Clark, who serves on our city school board, received a high honor at the Tennessee Teachers Convention recently, one of only 3 of our locals that have won this award over the years. So we wanted to do a resolution honoring him, if that's acceptable. And then also, we wanted to do a resolution honoring Coach Kenny Morrison and his staff and some players that received Region 5 annual honors for performance on the field. Is that okay?
Yes.
And then we will, since we're not doing a banquet this year because of COVID, we will do Employee Service Awards Tuesday night, and recognition of retirees, and also 2001 Distinguished Service Awards during that. Last item we have under other, Mr. Steve Elliott, attorney, that we voted on last month to look into 2 city employee complaints is here. He has finished his report and is ready to present it to the board.
First, let me thank you all for the opportunity and invitation to be here today. This is a challenging matter. It's delicate. Needs to be handled with appropriate care and respect, and I think that's been handled this process fairly and impartially throughout. Let me first just kind of introduce myself by way of background. I'm an attorney in Nashville, Tennessee, have been for 22-something years. A good percentage of my practice, as well as just litigation of various matters, has focused on investigation of employment practices, issues, and matters in both the public and private sector. Yesterday was just referred an EEOC investigation for a nursing home entity in Nashville. So that's the scope of my work. Work for various public entities such as Winchester, their separate Winchester utility system, Deckard, Coffee County, Lewisburg, and more recently Metro Nashville Public Schools, which obviously has to be handled very delicately with some of those issues. A large scope of that practice is to not only run EEOC investigations, but also make recommendations to those entities for various employment actions concerning employees and elected officials. I will note that I have served as an impartial hearing officer for Metro Nashville Public Schools in lieu of an administrative law judge, and I have made 15+ recommendations to the school board for employee action and have, knock on wood, not been rejected by the board one time as far as my recommendations, and any decision of mine that was made that was appealed to the courts in Davidson County, all of those have been affirmed. So with that background in mind, let me set forth that I found no conflict on my end in representing and handling this matter. Obviously, the city attorney perceived a conflict, and anytime an attorney perceives so much as a conflict, whether or not one exists to begin with, even the perception of conflict is something that has to be handled very delicately. So Mr. Hill was entirely appropriate to raise that issue. I will note I have no conflict of issue on my end. I have no local ties here. I live in Williamson County. My kids go to Williamson County schools. I work in Davidson County. I don't own property here. As far as I know, I have no relatives here. So no conflict. Let me talk about what I was tasked to do and what I did do. I conducted an investigation of 2 employee complaints, and you all, I've referred to them by their initials in the report in the interest of being respectful and delicate towards them in coming forward and making these grievances. For purposes of today, I will refer to them as employees 1 and 2. You all have on your iPad who they are. I conducted various interviews. I interviewed all of you who are sitting before me, interviewed the grieving parties, and interviewed other witnesses as I saw needed to be. I've reviewed various documents that the mayor has provided to me, including your city
code, your charter, your personnel rules, and your code of ethics, as well as various documents that have come up on social media as well as the newspaper. I've reviewed and watched at length several of your board meetings where matters were discussed that were pertinent to this matter. So I feel like I have a good understanding of what the issues are based on what I've been provided and what I've investigated. Let me address first, I believe I have standing to investigate these two grievances. I know that was raised in a past meeting about whether or not there is standing. 1.3 of your personnel rules does cover that, as well as what I found even more appropriate, Rule 6.5, which applies to all city employees and elected officials. It actually states that, I believe, at least twice in 6.5, that policy applies to elected officials just like city employees. Under that policy, it does state the governing body may discipline an elected official in whatever manner it deems appropriate, consistent with its authority under state law, the municipal charter, ordinances, resolutions, or other acts governing discipline of elected officials. What that simply means is, to me, as an attorney handling investigations like this, is you all, whether you knew it or not, when you all enacted that policy, you gave yourselves broad discretionary authority to act in whatever manner you deemed fit. And you've worded that well. That's appropriate. In this situation, you all voted to have an outside counsel investigate complaints against an alderman and then report those findings, which I have done in this report. Let me first address let me go through the findings if I can. I'm just going to kind of summarize those. I know you already have them, you've reviewed them. With regard to those two employees, I did find that those grievances, both of them and each of them, do have merit and they are substantiated. With regard to the first employee that I've referenced in my report, I did find that there was bullying, there was abusive and intimidating language used by the alderman. There is a power imbalance between the two of them that's inherent with an elected official and a city employee, especially one who's not a department head or chair. Additionally, you have an attachment to the report which has some inappropriate comments directed by the alderman to another city employee about employee number one, and that is additionally not appropriate. That language is not courteous, it's not respectful, and I will note in my investigation that the alderman confirmed and affirmed such statements that were made. Those statements do not foster a safe and productive work environment for anyone, and let alone employee number one. Such comments have had a negative impact on their work, have caused emotional distress to them, and I will note I do find employee number one credible and honest and have no reason to disregard what they have to say or disbelieve what they have to say. With regard to employee number two, you have slightly a different matter in regards to the Elk Valley Times article where two comments were referenced about creative accounting and that city accounts or accounts were robbed. The alderman confirmed that she was not misquoted, that was an interview given voluntarily. Once again, those comments are not courteous, they're not respectful, they've not served to promote a safe and productive work environment, especially for employee number two. Those comments could be construed as defamatory as to her reputation and negatively impact her reputation in her capacity as a city employee, especially regarding the city's finances. As we just heard from your accountant, how important these finances are in the audit process, and for an alderman to bring those comments to bear in a newspaper article are entirely inappropriate, especially when it seems like later in a board meeting that the employee was supported by the alderman on her numbers. I think Mr. Bryant had her come up and present. I also need to discuss with you all and present to you all that there are matters of potential retaliation that occurred either during my investigation or just prior to it. You have as an attachment on your iPad what I'll call a threat letter. I know of no other way to characterize it, directed toward employee number one's spouse, which refers to the employee directly. While the alderman has denied any role in sending that or preparing that, I do find it curious and coincidental that that letter was sent at that point in the investigation. That letter can serve as no other effect than have a chilling effect on an employee. It's incredibly inappropriate. And actually, the laws are much tougher for retaliation than the actual act or event that may have occurred before. And so, as an investigator of this complaint, in order to keep a fair and impartial process, that type of threat letter has no place in this at all. It's entirely inappropriate and never should have occurred. Whoever did that should be, there aren't really words to express whoever sent that, how they should feel. And my concern about that is, I hope I'm conveying that well enough. There are Facebook comments that were made by the alderman during the investigation. You have the attachment on your iPad. Likewise, those comments are inappropriate, especially with an investigation pending. Again, I'm trying to keep a fair and impartial process, and that could have served certainly as a chilling effect as well. I will note that I did find full participation by all parties involved, both the grieving parties and the respondent alderman. No concerns about whether or not everyone was participating fully. I found that did occur. There was an issue raised about a single act defense. I will address that since it was raised in a board meeting. I find that the single act defense here is moot. It does not apply. We have multiple acts here, which I've outlined in my report and summarized today. And so therefore the single act defense is not applicable. I do find that there was no wrongdoing by the employees, and once again, I found that they were all credible in their complaint. Let me kind of address my conclusions now and kind of what I think and what my recommendation is based on the law. I do find that 6.5 of your personnel policy applies to elected officials. Again, it says it at least twice. It is black letter, as plain on the page as it can be. I do find that 6.5 is a model policy that's designed to prevent harassment, abuse, bullying, inappropriate comments in the workplace. Aldermen don't have diplomatic immunity. It is covered under 6.5, and they don't have immunity for things like this. Section 6.5 does provide an adequate process for you all, as a board of elected officials, to address any alderman's actions. And I've read that from page 53. The hiring of outside counsel was proper under that process. I do not believe it was proper for city council, for city attorney, or a human resources representative of the city to handle that matter. Not doing this in-house, going out of house to do this was entirely appropriate by you all. I do find that there were multiple acts of inappropriate comments by the alderman and not a single act regarding employees 1 and 2. My recommendation, based on my knowledge, experience, background in handling these types of matters, that public censure is appropriate. Under your Code of Ethics 1-611, that the alderman is subject to censure by the governing body. I do not believe this rises to the level of injunction or removal or anything as severe as that at this point, but I do find public censure is appropriate. And at this point, if there are questions, happy to address them.
I have one.
Yes, sir.
I don't really know what public censure is. What is that?
Yeah, so it would be a document, and I'm happy to help you all craft such a document, but it's essentially a document letting the alderman know that such actions were inappropriate. Those comments have no place in what's supposed to be a safe and productive workplace, and that the alderman is asked to please reconsider such comments in the future.
Okay. All right. One more question. This is a fairly lengthy report. we will be required, no doubt, to take action on this. We won't have any choice but to. I'm assuming here now, if I'm wrong, tell me. I'm assuming once the board takes action on this, that this report becomes part of the minutes,
It does.
public minutes.
It does. I think it's that serious.
Okay, thank you. That's all I've got.
Other comments? Alderman, you like to make a response?
My turn.
That, Mayor, that's my report. All right, thank you.
We'll carry this forward to Tuesday. All right. Any other items before us today?
I've got just one thing. I want to compliment all the departments, the department heads, finance, every department. It takes every department to make things work right on these audits. It's the employees' hard work, and it's the employees very careful in the way they do their work that helps us get to this point. So we've got to a point this year to where there's no findings. Normally we have one or two minors, no findings. We've come through the year with a stronger revenue than what we had expenditures, and the employees helps us, or they help me anyway. I know they help me personally, kind of how to stay on the right track. And I appreciate all the hard work that the employees does to make this happen. Thank you very much.
And to know that it is tough when you're in a smaller city with a smaller finance department not to have findings because you have a small staff and a lot of, multiple hats they wear and everything. So credit, and also credit Putnam and Hancock. They spent a lot of time. They set up in our conference room and put a lot of hours. So having said that, we'll adjourn and we'll meet Tuesday evening.